We are going into our next lesson on end time review, our Revelation review. We're going to be looking at the sixth trumpet judgment today, and we're going to be looking in the book of Revelations, chapter number 9. And verse number 13. And that's Revelation chapter 9, verse 13 through 16. And the sixth angel is also the second woe, which is found in the book of Revelations, chapter 13 through 16. By the way, before we go with that, you remember our chart, and we talked about the three woes. So the first woe starts at the fifth trumpet judgment. And so we have the first woe at trumpet number 5. We have the sixth woe at trumpet number 6. The second woe. The second woe at trumpet number 6. And the third woe at trumpet number 7. So these three woes indicate the urgency, how close we are. So the Bible says, in chapter 9, verse 13, it says, "And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army was 200,000 thousands. And I heard the number of them. This prophecy foretells a war that will kill 1/3 of mankind. The Bible says that it will begin from the Euphrates River area. An army of 200 million will participate in this war. As a result of this war, 1/3 of mankind will be killed. By today's standards, based on the last United Nations report of the world's population, that would be about 2.63 billion dead, 40 times the death toll of World War II. So, if you notice, I've got two charts here. I have the chart here, and then I have a map that I did, just to kind of give an idea of the way that the Euphrates River flows. We have Turkey at the top, and then the Euphrates River starts at the top and runs down through Syria, through Iraq, and then it empties out in the Persian Gulf. We have Israel and Jordan and Jerusalem all over here to the left. We have Iran over here to the right on the eastern side. We have the Mediterranean Sea over here on the western side. And then on the southern side of the Euphrates River, we have Saudi Arabia. Now, let's try to get familiar with this. Turkey, which is north, actually Turkey is true north of Jerusalem. And so Turkey has 98% Islamic. Syria is 92% Islamic. Iraq is 97% Islamic. And Iran is 100% Islamic. And the Euphrates River is 100% controlled by Islamism. Now, it's important for us to remember this, because in our lesson we're going to be bringing out some things that is going to be very relevant to this fact. Now, the Bible says, as we read, there's 4 angels bound in the great river Euphrates. So there's 4 angels bound in this river. We also now know that the angels are spirits. The Bible says that angels are ministering spirits. God's loyal angels in Hebrews 1:14 lets us know that they're ministering spirits to minister to the heirs of salvation. The fact that these angels were bound lends to the idea that these four are fallen angels who were in rebellion with Satan. Peter tells us to be sober in 1 Peter 5:8, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. So you better believe that his army of angels that are in rebellion with him are also as roaring lions ready to kill. So we have 4 of Satan's angels found here in Revelation chapter 9. 4 angels / spirits about to be set free. The angel with the 6th trumpet goes down into the abyss and unlocks that cell door. He unlocks the door. It's important to remember that these 4 angels come from this Euphrates River area that we talked about here. That's where they emanate from. They come from the Euphrates River area. And so what is the significance of the Euphrates River? The Euphrates River emanates, as I said earlier, from the eastern mountains of Turkey. In other words, what I mean by that, when I first looked at the Euphrates River, the question come to my mind is, as we can see, the Euphrates River flows through the Islamic countries into the Persian Gulf. But what I was curious to know was, where does it start from? And I was curious whether or not it dumped out of the Mediterranean Sea, out of the northern side of the Mediterranean. But I just wasn't certain. And so I began to do a little study to try to find out where it came from. And we find that this Euphrates River actually emanates from the mountains of Turkey. It doesn't really come from another sea or another ocean or another lake or anything like that. It emanates from Turkey. Now, let's remember that the 7 churches of Asia that John wrote about, if you remember, about the book of Revelation in chapters 2 and 3, these churches were along the western side of Turkey's coastline. So the churches of Asia would be northwest in the northwest region. In fact, Ephesus is right up here where I'm pointing to in my pointer. Ephesus would be right in this area here. But north of Ephesus is a church called Pergamos. And that's very important to remember. John wrote in Revelations 2 and 12 and 13, he says, "And to the angel of the church in Pergamos write these things, saith he which hath the sharp sword with two edges. He says, I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. And thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth." Now, it's interesting to note that the Bible says that Satan's seat sits in the area closest to the church of Pergamos, which is the northwest side of Turkey. So Satan's seat is there. The New King James Version has actually a clear translation of this word seat. The New King James Version calls Satan's seat Satan's throne. It says, I know where thou dwellest, even where Satan's throne is. So, what we know is that the Euphrates River flows out from Satan's throne from the north and flows down through Syria and Iraq and empties into the Persian Gulf down below. And so these four spirits or angels will stir up a war that will kill over 2 billion people, 40 times the death toll of World War II. While we know that Islam will participate in this war, there are two other countries able to field an army of 200 million. Now you remember in our lesson, and I want to bring this out before I go any further, but in our chart over here we have the three woes. Well, you remember we talked about the first, second, and third seal judgment, which is pre-20th century. We talked about how that those things took place: capitalism, communism. We talked about capitalism, communism, and the white horse rider with us, which is Catholicism. And so we have these three horses that are before the 20th century, but the fourth seal, or the fourth horse rider, is this pale horse rider right here. And if you notice, I have it in green because the word pale is translated chloros, which means green. And so we know that the national color of Islam is green. Their flags are green. They have green uniforms. Green is their national color. And so we have this chloros horse that symbolizes death. Okay, remember the prophecy said that the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000 thousands. This is 200 million. While Islam could field 200 million man army, both China and India could also field a 200 million man army. So the idea arises, or the thought arises, that maybe there's more than one that could participate. Maybe both China and Islam could work together to field a 200 million man army. So let's look a little closer at Islam and China. Remember, Islam, as I said, is the pale horse rider that's found in Revelation 6 and 8. It says, and I looked and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed him. And power was given unto them over a fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beast of the earth. So here is a chloros horse, a pale horse, which means the color of green, which is the national color of Islam, as I said. The name of the rider of this horse is Death. Well, now, when we look at the red horse rider found in Revelation 6 and 4, we know that the national color of communism is red. And its rider takes peace from the earth. And this rider carries a sword also. Notice that the sword is associated with both the red and chloros horse rider. And they both are associated with death. The two military threats right now are Islam and China. Both very capable of fielding an army of 200 million men. Daniel Pipes, a writer, had a book he wrote entitled Militant Islam Reaches America on page 13. It says the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, if you remember, we talked about the collapse of the Soviet Union, the prophecy of 1991 prompted loose talk about Islam replacing Marxism/Leninism as the West's necessary enemy. In other words, what he's saying is it's believed by some that Islam will actually replace Marxism. Remember, Marxism was Karl Marx, the man who founded communism. So, communism is believed to be replaced by some with Islamism. And we talked about the war that emanates, that's in fact going on even now. The Iraq War that's been going on, and the fighting that went on in Afghanistan, and all the stuff that was going on in the Middle East. There's been fighting going on. It actually got it actually escalated with the event of 9/11, the Twin Towers. I've studied eschatology since I was about 18 years old. Maybe not as close as I have over the past 40 years, but one thing I know that I've learned about prophecy is hindsight is 20/20. It's easier to look back and see more clearly the prophecies of the Bible than it is to look forward. So we can see the first 5 trumpet judgments more clearly. But because trumpet number 6 is the trumpet judgment where we're at now, in fact, some people believe that there are people that believe that we've already entered the 6th trumpet judgment. If you notice on our chart right here, I've got a pink line that runs across here. And that pink line indicates the estimated time frame of where we're at right now. So I've got the time frame just before the 6th trumpet, but who knows? We might find out as we progress that we might have already crossed that line. And we're going to talk about that here in a bit. But so what could trigger this one world war, or this third world war? What could trigger such a war? What could bring it about? We know that the war, according to the Scriptures, we know that that war is going to take place it's going to start. It doesn't mean that that this is the only area where the war is going to take place. We know that that war starts. And we know that technically there is a war that's already started in this area. So we know that that war starts in the Euphrates River area. According to the August 30, 2008 edition of the Jerusalem Post, the Iranian Deputy Chief of Staff warned. He said, should Israel or the United States attack Iran, it would be the start of another world war. And so the Post goes on to say there is grave concern now about Iran's creating nuclear weapons, changes the height of the possibility of Israel striking there very soon. So this sixth trumpet judgment will be the next on the timeline if, in fact, we cannot be certain that it's not already started. That's something really to think about. We may be farther toward this last trumpet judgment than we think. So, let's look at some people who believe that we have already crossed that line, that we've already started World War III, and that World War III is actually being fought already. James Woolsey, director of the CIA under Bill Clinton, said he believes World War III started on September 11, 2001 with the attacks on the Twin Towers, 9/11. Thomas Friedman, a journalist with the New York Times, said he believes World War III started on 9/11 as well. Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House, also agrees it started on 9/11. And George W. Bush said, referring to the revolt on Flight 93, you remember when the 9/11 happened, you remember the flight that was in the air and the passengers were trying to fight the terrorists on board the plane that had the box cutters. You remember when all that was going on? George Bush said, referring to the revolt on Flight 93, that it was the first counterattack to World War III. So obviously Bush thinks that we've already entered World War III. World War III has already started. So it's believed that we have already entered the sixth trumpet war, but we won't have any doubts when we realize that a third of the population have died in that war. When we realize that 40 times the amount of people that died in World War II, that's a lot of people. But yet the Bible predicts it. The Bible predicts a third of the population being wiped out in this war. China, let's look closer at China. Now we talked about Islam, and we talked about the Euphrates River area. We know this is where it starts at. But the question is, could China lead this 200 million man army prophesied in the Bible? China is expected to lead the United States in that superpower status very soon. So, let's first talk about warfare for a moment. When people think of warfare, fighting, wars, they think of guns, planes, tanks, bombs. This is what we call conventional warfare. But the new era, or the new kinds of warfare in this modern age we live in, are quite different. They're quite different than the old ways of fighting battles. You know, even in World War I, World War II, you know, before that it was horses and chariots and the like. Then we started using bombs and planes and guns. Well, now we have different, if you listen to terms used for warfare, let me just go over some of them. We have what's called economic warfare. That's where you weaken a nation economically, like putting sanctions on a country and controlling the money flow of a nation. That's considered now as a form of warfare. Another form of warfare is what's called information warfare. Feeding the population with false news stories, offering slanted statements, views, and half-truths, while another group is trying to get truth out to the population. So there's this warfare going on. You remember Hillary Clinton made the statement, "We've lost the information war." She made that statement. People are waking up today to the fact that the news have lied to them. People are waking up all over the world right now. People are waking up to that fact. So we have what's called information warfare. Well, we also have a third one, and it's called Fabian warfare. I studied Fabianism several years back. A Fabian is a very patient communist. Communists will sit back and he'll wait and lurk for opportunities. Fabian warfare is avoiding a frontal attack. That's the actual definition. They avoid a frontal attack while at the same time manipulating by stealth to wear down your opponent. It's like an instigator who plays one group against another group. You know, we have some nation. We have large nations that will play one nation against another nation, two countries, and they'll have them fighting one another. And then when they're both weakened down through battling one another, then the bigger nation comes and wipes them both out. That's Fabian warfare. We have what's called biological warfare. This is an interesting one, especially when we're talking about China. Biological warfare is using toxins, poison gas. Remember Saddam Hussein gassed his own people. I believe it was mushroom gas or something like that. I can't remember what they called it. Man-made viruses and vaccines are also considered biological warfare if they're used as a reduction of or used as population control. So, with a better understanding of modern warfare, it broadens our ability to understand how the sixth trumpet judgment could better unfold. So when we think of warfare, we shouldn't always just think about tanks and planes and guns and jeeps. But it can be a lot bigger than what we think it is. And with the more modern types of warfare, could it not be that we very well may have already entered the sixth trumpet judgment? I've read reports of China spy networks throughout the United States as of 2019 China owned 191,000 acres of land in the United States, worth around $1.9 billion, which does not seem like very much, but China's ownership of farmland has dramatically exploded over the last decade. That's interesting. You don't have to take my word for it. China has entered the economic warfare stage. Just look at the labels of all those goods you purchased at Walmart's. And think about economic warfare for a moment. Then you have the virus and Chinese-made vaccines. Next, you have a plan called Agenda 21 to depopulate the earth by 95%. This plan is put out by the United Nations called Sustainable Development. So you think about it, United Nations hands everything, all the information down to the WHO. Seems to me like not long ago we stopped funding the WHO when President Trump was in office because they wasn't telling us the truth. Seemed like I remember reading some reports about that. So they funnel it down to the CDC, and the CDC, man, brings it down to our state and local representatives. They say you need to have a needle stuck in you. Comes from the United Nations. Same people that want to implement Agenda 21, a plan for sustainable development. We have to save the planet from all those undesirables called humans, because they're destroying the planet, you see. And so where is this army of 200 million coming from? This is just food for thought. I'm not making accusations of any kind. I'm just giving food for thought. I'm just offering certain prospects. So with this in mind, we can better understand the sixth trumpet judgment of 200 million man army to depopulate or kill 1/3 of mankind. So is it possible that we may have already crossed this sixth trumpet judgment? Is it possible that we've already crossed the sixth trumpet judgment? That it's already happened? And that we're actually going deeper into it? You know, the interesting thing is that we have the Gulf War being the first woe,